Greetings! This is another video lecture on parsing sentences. This time we will be looking at transformed sentences, in particular those with negative orientation and those with conditional, interrogative, and imperative mood. There is a transcript of this lecture available to you, and it's linked just above this video in your course material. Let's get started. Recall that the deep structure of sentences is posited to be positive in orientation, statement in form, indicative in mood, and active in voice. Remember, too, that transformations resulting in different orientation, form, mood, and/or voice do not change the meaning of the sentence. Transformations may change emphasis or tone, but they do not change meaning. The way it was is the way it is applies not only to grammatical function, but also to semantic content. In this video lecture, I will take you through the steps of transformations that create sentences with negative orientation, question and exclamation forms, and conditional, interrogative, and imperative moods. After which, I think we'll need a break before completing our study of transformations with existential there and it and passive sentences. As with the previous video lectures, I invite you to parse along with the handout provided. Negation. Perhaps the simple negative transformation seems to be the most counterintuitive as far as meaning change is concerned. However, the negative transformation does not change the meaning of the deep structure sentence. It merely negates the main verb in the surface structure. The negative transformation is a simple one-step transformation. Insert the negative not after the first word of the main verb unless the first word is a verb. This applies to verbs that begin with a modal auxiliary or with one of the primary auxiliaries, be, have, or do. If the first word in the main verb is a verb other than the be verb, insert auxiliary do and the negative not in front of the verb. The tense of the main verb moves to auxiliary do, and the verb form becomes the infinitive or base form. If the verb is the be verb, insert the negative not after the verb. Now let's look at an example of each of these negative transformations and parse the surface structures. To make I had studied Chomsky before negative, insert the negative not after the first word in the main verb, which is had, to produce the sentence, I had not studied Chomsky before. So we have I, our personal pronoun, moving from left to right, labeling lexical items. Had is auxiliary have. Not is the negative, it's also auxiliary. Studied is a transitive verb, and it's the past participle of the transitive verb. Chomsky is a proper noun, and before is an adverb of time. Moving from right to left, we have our adverb of time. Then we have this proper noun forming a noun phrase that functions as the direct object of the transitive verb studied. Our main verb, had not studied, is in the past. The tense is in had, that's past tense. And it's past perfect because we have auxiliary have followed by the past participle of the verb. So the main verb status is past perfect, and that is our verb phrase functioning as our predicate. And then we have the personal pronoun I in the noun phrase slot functioning as the subject. To make I studied Chomsky, we have a new sentence here. I studied Chomsky before. I'm going to have trouble with that name for this whole lecture, I think. Okay, so that was a verb that had an auxiliary in it already. If we take the sentence, I studied Chomsky before, negative, we have to insert auxiliary do and the negative not before the verb studied and change to the base form of study in order to produce I did not study Chomsky before. So let's parse this negative sentence. Our personal pronoun, I, did is auxiliary do, not is our negative, which is also in the auxiliary. Study is a transitive verb. It's the base or infinitive form, so we don't need to label it otherwise. Chomsky, our proper noun, and before, adverb of time. Then moving from right to left, after our adverb of time, Chomsky once again, noun phrase functioning as direct object. And now our main verb, did not study, has the status of past. That's all it is. The tense is in the auxiliary do. There's no other descriptor for the status of this main verb. And that gives us our verb phrase functioning as the predicate. And here's I again in the noun phrase functioning as subject slot. So that is how we handle a verb. That's just one word. Now, how do we handle a be verb? To make the sentence, Chomsky's prose is tortured, negative. Insert the negative not after the verb is to produce Chomsky's prose is not tortured. It really is very difficult, almost torturous to read, but we're working with transformations and not with truth value, so let's look at this sentence. Chomsky's prose is not tortured. Chomsky's is a proper genitive noun. Prose is a noun. Is our be verb. Not is our negative, and it is an auxiliary. And tortured is an adjective. I know it's a past participle, but it's in an adjective slot, so we're just going to call it adjective. It's easier that way. So moving from right to left, tortured is an adjective phrase functioning as a predicate adjective after the be verb. Our main verb is present. The auxiliary is part of the main verb, but it has no effect on the status. That's our verb phrase functioning as predicate. And Chomsky's prose, noun phrase functioning as subject. Now, here's a word of caution. Not is the only negative. Not is the only negative. No is not a negative. It belongs to the class of determiners and patterns with nouns, not with verbs. For example, Chomsky's prose is no picnic is not a negative sentence, and it's parsed like this. Chomsky's is our proper genitive noun. Picnic, noun. Is our be verb. No is a determiner, and picnic is a noun. Moving from right to left, no picnic is a noun phrase functioning as a predicate noun after the be verb. The status of our main verb is present. There's the predicate, the verb phrase functioning as the predicate. And once again, Chomsky's prose is the noun phrase functioning as the subject. So that's it for the negative transformation. The two things are to remember are that the placement of not, it is part of the auxiliary, part of the main verb, but it has no effect on the status of the main verb. The other thing to remember is that not is the only negative. No is a determiner, and patterns with nouns. Now we want to move on to the conditional mood. The conditional mood is another one-step insertion transformation that takes place within the main verb, changing the indicative mood of the deep structure to the to the conditional mood of the surface structure. Insert a modal auxiliary or semimodal, marginal auxiliary, in front of the verb. These are listed in Table 5.6 on page 150. In this process, the verb changes from a finite to the infinite form because the auxiliary as the first word in the main verb will hold the tense. The sentence "I can read Chomsky's prose" is parsed like this. We have our personal pronoun I, moving from left to right. Can is a modal auxiliary. Read is a transitive verb. Chomsky's are proper genitive noun, and prose noun. Moving from right to left, Chomsky's prose, noun phrase, functioning as the direct object of can read. Our main verb, the status of our main verb is present. Can is present tense. The modal auxiliary holds the tense, and it also creates the conditional mood. So we describe the status of this main verb as present conditional. We have not been indicating when the status of the main verb is indicative unless otherwise indicated. That is assumed. Now that we have our main verb, we have our verb phrase functioning as the predicate, and then here's our usual I in the noun phrase functioning as subject slot. Now that the mood of the verb is other than indicative, we must indicate it with the tense and the status of the main verb. If the mood is not indicated, it is assumed to be indicative. Please note the present and past tense forms of the modal auxiliaries. This should reinforce the concept that tense is a grammatical form and not an indication of real time. And I've included this table in the transcript of the video lecture. It gives the base or present form and the past form of modal auxiliaries. Can and could, shall and should, will and would, may and might. And must appears not to have a past form. So check out that table in the transcript of this video lecture. This table I borrowed from Max Morenberg. He also lists seem to, happen to, want to, and be able to as semimodals. These modal auxiliaries indicate different kinds of conditions, which we will address in session 15, and so they're important in stylistic analysis. Now we'll look at yes, no, and WH questions. In English, we have two transformations that change statement form to question form and indicative mood to interrogative mood. The yes-no question transformation consists of a rearrangement or an insertion and a rearrangement depending on the verb. Move the first word of the main verb to the front of the sentence unless the first word in the main verb is a verb, not an auxiliary. If the verb is the be verb, move the verb to the front of the sentence. If the first word of the verb is a verb other than the be verb, insert auxiliary do and move auxiliary do to the front of the sentence. Let's parse the exemplary service structure sentences at the bottom of page 188 in your textbook. Should the students have questions? Should is a modal auxiliary. Well, let me erase this other parsing because that is not right for this sentence. Should is a modal auxiliary. The determiner, students, noun, have a transitive verb, and questions, a noun. Moving from right to left, questions is a noun phrase functioning as the direct object of the main verb should have. This verb has been disjoined. I've done it differently in the tables in the transcript, but what I do when I'm parsing by hand is to connect the main verb with a line above the sentence and an arrow. And so now we describe the main verb as past because the tense is here in should, that's past tense, and interrogative because the verb is disjoined. The modal auxiliary has been moved to the front of the sentence. So the status of the main verb is past interrogative. And then we have our verb phrase functioning as predicate, and the students is the noun phrase functioning as the subject. The line connecting should to have above the sentence places should in the main verb in the predicate where it belongs. Makes the parsing a little neater, I think, to do it that way. Let's see. Where am I now? Oh, here we go. Should the students have questions? Yes, they should. And they should post them to the parsing Q&A on the discussion board for this session. Notice the disjoined verb and that, since the mood has been changed from indicative to interrogative, we must indicate int in the status of the main verb. Note, when parsing on the board, I draw an arrow above the sentence from should to have to indicate that should have forms the main verb. And I will do the same with the other bolded entries. In the tables in the transcript of the lecture, I bold the two parts of the main verb to show that they belong together. Let's move on to a question formed from a sentence that has the be verb in it. Was that question brilliant? We start with our be verb. That is the determiner that. Question is a noun, and brilliant is an adjective. Now, parsing from right to left, brilliant is an adjective phrase. We have to look for our main verb, which is a be verb, so brilliant functions as a predicate adjective. That question is the noun phrase functioning as the subject of the verb be. So we want to draw another arrow and bring our main verb into the predicate where it belongs. The main verb is past interrogative. The tense is in the verb, it's past tense, and the interrogative mood is created by the movement of the verb to the front of the sentence. And so now we have our complete predicate. Was brilliant is our predicate. And that's how this sentence is parsed. Was that question brilliant? I can't answer that question until you post your question to this session's parsing Q&A. In the meantime, note that here we see a disjoined predicate. Okay, let's look at one more yes/no question. one that involves the insertion of the auxiliary do. From the statement, you have a question, we form the question, do you have a question? So let's parse this. We have auxiliary do. You is a personal pronoun. Have is a transitive verb. A is a determiner. Question is a noun. Moving from right to left, a question is a noun phrase functioning as the direct object of the transitive verb have. Our main verb is do have, and its status is present. Do is present, interrogative, because the verb is disjoined. The do is at the front of the sentence. And that gives us our complete predicate, our verb phrase functioning as predicate, and you is the noun phrase functioning as subject. So those are the varieties of yes-no questions. Do you have a question? I hope you do, and I look forward to answering your questions in the parsing Q&A. Once again, we have a disjoined main verb. Note that the auxiliary do holds the tense of the main verb. It's the rearrangement that changes the mood to interrogative, not the insertion of an auxiliary. The only auxiliaries that change the mood are the modal auxiliaries. Now let's look at WH questions. WH questions involve replacing a noun, adverb, or determiner in order to query it, and may involve moving the replacement form to the front of the sentence. Like the yes-no question transformation, the WH question transformation changes the form of the deep structure sentence from statement to question and the mood from indicative to interrogative. Here are the steps. Replace the phrase to be queried as follows. Replace a noun phrase with an interrogative pronoun. Replace an adverb phrase with an interrogative pro-adverb, or replace a determiner with an interrogative pro-determiner. If the interrogative pro form is not at the front of the sentence, move it to the front of the sentence. Move the auxiliary verb next to the WH form. If there is no auxiliary, insert auxiliary do and move it next to the WH form. So those are 3 steps. Before we parse some WH sentences, in the transcript I have included a table of interrogative pro forms because I'm pretty sure you haven't heard of pro-adverbs and pro-determiners before. But just like pronouns replace nouns, these pro forms replace adverbs and determiners respectively. You're familiar with the interrogative pronouns, what, who, and whom. And you're familiar with the interrogative pro-adverbs, where, when, why, how, and how often, although you haven't heard them called pro-adverbs before. You're also familiar with whose, which, and what, even though you haven't heard them called interrogative pro-determiners before. But now that you've heard that terminology and been through the 3 steps for forming a WH question, let's parse sentences that exemplify surface structures that query each of the 3 different kinds of constituents: nouns, adverbs, and determiners. In parsing these proforms, you'll want to keep in mind the mantra, the way it was is the way it is. To query the subject noun phrase in the sentence, the teacher asks many questions. We follow the WH transformational steps to create the sentence, who asks many questions. Now let's parse. Who is an interrogative pronoun. Asks is a transitive verb. To is adverb. Many is their determiner. And questions is a noun. So moving from right to left, too many questions is a noun phrase functioning as the direct object of the transitive verb asks. Asks, how are we going to indicate the status of our main verb. It's present, and it's also interrogative because the subject is an interrogative pronoun. So present interrogative, and there is our complete predicate, verb phrase functioning as predicate, and the interrogative pronoun who is in the noun phrase functioning as subject slot. It replaced the subject in the statement form. It remains the subject in the question form. To query what the teacher asks, we follow the transformational steps and create the sentence, what does the teacher ask? So let's parse this question. What is an interrogative pronoun? Does is auxiliary do. The is a determiner. Teacher is a noun. And ask is a transitive verb. You might have to work backwards before you really are convinced that ask is a transitive verb. But take my word for it for right now. Okay, what is our main verb? Our main verb is does ask. So it's present, does is present, and it's interrogative because it's been disjoined. The next constituent to the left is the teacher, which is the noun phrase functioning as the subject of this sentence. What do we do with what? In the sentence, the teacher asks questions. What replaced questions, which is a noun phrase functioning as the direct object of the verb. And so it really belongs in the predicate. And so we're going to draw another line to indicate that and parse our verb phrase functioning as predicate that includes the disjoined verb does ask and the fronted interrogative pronoun what. So there's our sentence. The teacher, noun phrase subject, does ask what, verb phrase predicate. The way it was is the way it is. To query the adverb phrase in the teacher asks many questions because she's a good teacher, we follow the transformational steps and create a different sentence. Why does the teacher ask many questions? Why is an interrogative pro-adverb. Does is auxiliary do. The is a determiner. Teacher is a noun. Ask is the transitive verb. Too many questions. Adverb, determiner, noun. And there's too many questions, noun phrase, functioning as direct object of the transitive verb ask. Now what's our main verb? Does ask. So the status of our main verb is present interrogative. The teacher is the noun phrase functioning as the subject of the main verb, does ask. What do we do with why? Where did it come from? What does it replace? It replaces because she's a good teacher. It replaces an adverb phrase, in the predicate. So the way it was is the way it is. It's functioning as an adverb of reason, an interrogative pro-adverb functioning as an adverb of reason, and it belongs in the predicate. So now we have our complete predicate. Does ask too many questions, why? That's our verb phrase functioning as predicate. And there we have our complete sentence. The adverb clause, because she's a good teacher, is an adverb of reason in the deep structure. So the why that replaces it functions as an adverb of reason. The adverb clause, because she's a good teacher, is a constituent of the predicate in the deep structure, and it is still a constituent of the predicate in the surface structure, even though it's been disjoined. The way it was is the way it is. Now about prodeterminers. They're a little different. They behave a little differently. Prodeterminers replace determiners and genitive nouns, but the entire noun phrase in which the determiner or genitive noun appears is moved to the front of the sentence, not merely the determiner or the genitive noun, not merely the prodeterminer. In querying the determiner in the sentence, the students went that way. The WH question transformation creates the question, which way did the students go? So, which is an interrogative prodeterminer. Way is a noun. I guess we should put this prodeterminer. Did is auxiliary do. The is a determiner. Students is a noun. Go is a verb. We'll determine what kind of verb in just a minute. Moving from right to left, did go is our main verb, and we know it's past and interrogative, but we're still not sure what kind of verb it is. The students is our noun phrase functioning as the subject of the verb did go, and then we're left with which way. Which way is a noun phrase functioning as an adverb of place. And it replaces a constituent that was in the predicate of the deep structure. So in the surface structure, it still belongs in the predicate. So we're going to move which way back into the predicate. The students did go which way. It's an adverb of place, so that makes go an intransitive verb. And now we can label this did go which way as our verb phrase functioning as predicate. And that's our complete sentence there. We've parsed all of the interrogative proforms as int, pro. Oh, wait, I'm skipping a sentence here. After which way did the students go? Let's look at another sentence with a prodeterminer. This one might be a little more appetizing. Whose barbecue did the guests enjoy last night? We've parsed all of the interrogative proforms as int, pro. We just do pro for pronoun, don't we? We could do pro adv for proadverb and pro det for prodeterminer. Sally's barbecue. This is made from the sentence, the guests enjoyed Sally's barbecue last night. So let's parse the question that comes from that sentence. Whose is an interrogative prodeterminer. It replaced Sally's in the original sentence. Barbecue is a noun. Did is auxiliary do. The, determiner. Guests, noun. Enjoy, a verb. And we'll wait for a moment to see what kind of verb that is. Last is a determiner, and night is a noun. So moving from right to left, last night is a noun phrase functioning as an adverb of time. Enjoy. Our main verb is did enjoy, and we know that the status is past and interrogative because the past tense is an auxiliary do and the verb is disjoint. But we're not quite sure what kind of verb it is yet. The guest, noun phrase functioning as the subject of the verb did enjoy. And now we have whose barbecue. A noun phrase. It functions as the direct object of the verb did enjoy. The guest did enjoy whose barbecue last night, but it's fronted because it's an interrogative mood, it's a question. So now we have, it's a transitive verb, has a direct object. And now we can label our complete verb phrase functioning as predicate. So our verb phrase predicate is did enjoy whose barbecue last night. And we've indicated that whose barbecue and did belong in the predicate with arrows above the line, connecting lines and arrows. Okay. Since Sally's barbecue was the direct object of the verb enjoyed, a constituent of the predicate, in the deep structure, it remains so in the surface structure. The way it was is the way it is. One more mood before we pause after this lecture, and that's the imperative mood. We've seen how transformations have changed the mood of the main verb from indicative to conditional and interrogative. Now let's look at the imperative mood and sentence form. The imperative transformation changes the sentence form from statement to exclamation and the indicative mood to imperative. The imperative transformation operates on deep structure sentences that have the personal pronoun you as the subject and the modal auxiliary will in the main verb. This is a deletion transformation that results in the only sentence in English that does not have a subject and does not have a finite verb. To transform an indicative statement with subject you and auxiliary will, delete both you and will. The resulting sentence consists only of a partial predicate. From the indicative statement, you will close the door, the imperative transformation deletes you and will to form the imperative close the door. Close is our verb, and it's followed by a determiner the and a noun door. Moving from right to left, the door is a noun phrase. It functions as a direct object of the transitive verb close. Our main verb does not have tense. The tense was dropped with the auxiliary will. All it has is mood. So the status of this main verb is imperative. That's it. This is a verb phrase. It functions as predicate. It might be partial predicate. I'll have to think about that, but that's not all that important right now. What's important is this is a whole sentence. And so when you're parsing an imperative sentence, you might just want to indicate that you know that this verb phrase constitutes the sentence. All right. Since the imperative sentence consists only of a verb phrase functioning as predicate, I like to indicate that it does constitute a complete sentence. Note that the only parsing of the main verb is the mood, imperative. The tense has been deleted along with the modal auxiliary will, leaving the verb in the infinitive or base form. Now let's take a break before we parse some more transformations. Thank you.